The most dangerous prisons are the ones we build for ourselves, brick by painful brick, and then convince the world is a palace. I've seen it 1,000 times. People come on my stage carrying the weight of a lie so heavy it's crushing them, crushing their families, and they're still trying to smile, to hold it all together, because the image has become more important than the person suffocating beneath it. This was the case with Jessica. When her story first crossed my desk, it looked, on the surface, like so many others, a letter from a desperate husband, Mark. He wrote that he was married to a ghost, a brand, a perfectly curated Instagram feed. He said, "Doctor, Phil, I don't recognize my wife anymore. I'm not even sure who she is behind the camera lens." The title of her online presence was something like Sunshine and Order. It was all white linen, freshly baked bread, children in matching khaki shorts with combed hair, and a perpetually serene smile on Jessica's face. She was selling an attainable dream to hundreds of thousands of followers, but according to her husband, she was living a nightmare. My producers did the initial workup, and the file they handed me was thick. On one side, you had screenshots of her digital life, captions about finding joy in the little things, and the beautiful chaos of motherhood. On the other side, you had the raw data of her real life, mounting credit card debt to finance the props for her perfect life, text message arguments with Mark that were vicious and heartbreaking, and reports from her sister that Jessica hadn't had a genuine, relaxed conversation in over 2 years. The central problem was clear. The persona had consumed the person. Jessica wasn't just performing for an audience. She was performing for herself, trying to convince herself that the fiction she'd created was real. I knew before she even walked out on that stage that this wasn't going to be about social media addiction. That's too simple. That's a symptom, not a cause. This was going to be about fear, a deep primal fear of what would happen if the world, and more importantly, if she herself saw the messy, imperfect, and utterly human reality she was working so hard to hide. People don't build fortresses unless they're terrified of what's outside, or, more often, what's inside. My first impression of her when she sat in the chair across from me was one of absolute, rigid control. Her posture was perfect, her outfit was tasteful and camera ready. Her smile was bright, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were scanning, constantly assessing. The audience, the cameras, me, she was performing. This was her stage, just a bigger one than the one in her living room where she'd prop up her phone to film a video about organic sourdough starter. Mark sat next to her, and the contrast was stark. He looked exhausted, his shoulders were slumped, his face was etched with a sadness that you just can't fake. He wasn't performing, he was a man at the end of his rope. I started gently. I always start gently. You have to give people a chance to tell their story in their own way, even if it's the story they've rehearsed. I asked her, "Jessica, tell me what your life is like. Tell me about Sunshine and Order." She launched into her pitch. It was polished. She spoke about authenticity, about inspiring other mothers, about creating a haven of peace in a chaotic world. She used all the right buzzwords. It was a monologue she had clearly given 100 times, both online and in her own head. I let her talk. I listened not just to the words, but to the rhythm, the cadence, the spaces in between. And in those spaces, I heard the desperation, the frantic energy of someone holding back a flood with a single finger. She was describing a life, but she wasn't describing her life. She was describing the life she was selling, and the first and most important customer was herself. After she finished, there was a beat of silence. The audience was polite. They'd heard a good commercial. but it wasn't the truth. And everyone in that room, including Jessica, knew it. I leaned forward, keeping my voice even. That's a beautiful picture you paint, Jessica. It truly is. My question is, does it feel as beautiful as it looks? That's when the first crack appeared. Just a tiny one. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her eyes darted over to Mark. It was an involuntary reflex, checking to see his reaction, to see if he was going to betray her. That glance told me everything. It told me she was terrified of the truth he was holding. I turned to him. Mark, I want you to tell me about the post from 2 weeks ago, the one about the spontaneous family picnic in the meadow. He took a deep breath, like a man about to dive into cold water. The picnic, he said, his voice quiet but steady. Yeah, it was spontaneous, all right. It was spontaneous because we just had the worst fight of our marriage that morning. She'd found out a credit card was maxed out. I hadn't even known about the card. It was one she'd opened to buy props. A new wicker basket, a vintage blanket, artisanal cheese she'd ordered from 3 states away. Stuff for the picnic. He looked at Jessica not with anger, but with a profound sadness. We were screaming at each other. The kids were upstairs. They could hear it. I told her we were drowning in debt, that this wasn't real. She called me unsupportive, said I didn't understand her business. Then an hour later, she comes downstairs in a new sundress, hair and makeup perfect, and says, let's be spontaneous. Let's go have a picnic and salvage the day. It wasn't about salvaging the day for us, for our family. It was about salvaging the shot, the content. He described how they drove to a field in stony silence, how she directed him and the children like a film director. Smile bigger, look like you love each other. No, tilt your head, it looks more authentic. He said the kids were confused and miserable. They just wanted to go home, but they posed for the photos and she got her shot. Later that evening, the post went up, a sun-drenched photo of a perfect family with a caption about choosing joy amidst the chaos. Mark said he read that caption and felt like he was going to be sick. The lie wasn't just online anymore, it was eating them from the inside out. As Mark spoke, Jessica didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles flexing. She was building the wall higher, faster, reinforcing it against this assault of reality. This is a critical moment. When someone is in full-blown denial, you can't tear the wall down with a sledgehammer. They'll just retreat further. You have to find the loose brick. You have to find the source of the fear that made them build the wall in the first place. Jessica, I said calmly, pulling her focus back to me, I want to talk about something else. I want you to tell me about the house you grew up in, not the physical house. Tell me what it felt like. She was clearly thrown by the question. It had nothing to do with Instagram, with Mark, with the debt. It was a pattern interrupt. She stammered for a moment. It was fine, normal. Normal is the word people use when they don't want to talk about something. It's a placeholder, a locked door. I have the key. Was it peaceful? Was it predictable? I ask. When you woke up in the morning as a little girl, did you know what the day was going to be like? And there it was. A single tear escaped and traced a path through her perfect makeup. She didn't even seem to notice it. She just shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a whisper. No, never. And the story came out, not all at once, but in painful fragments. A childhood that was the polar opposite of sunshine and order. It was a world of chaos. A father with a drinking problem, a mother working 2 jobs, stretched to her breaking point. There were loud arguments in the middle of the night. There was the uncertainty of whether the electricity would be on, whether there'd be food in the fridge. There was no order, no peace, no predictability. And as a little girl, Jessica found one way to cope, one way to exert control over a world that was spinning out of it. She started cleaning. She kept her small bedroom immaculate. Her dolls were lined up in perfect rows. Her clothes were folded with military precision. It was the one corner of her universe that was safe, that was orderly, that was under her command. It was the only place she could breathe. I looked at her, and the woman I saw wasn't a social media fraud. She was that little girl, still desperately trying to tidy up the chaos, to create a perfect little square in the universe where nothing bad could happen. Her Instagram feed wasn't a business. It was her childhood bedroom, magnified for the entire world to see. It was her defense mechanism, her security blanket. She wasn't selling a lie to her followers. She was trying to build a reality for herself that she had been denied. A reality where the surfaces were clean, the smiles were genuine, and there were no monsters hiding under the bed. The problem was, in order to maintain that perfect room, she was setting the rest of the house on fire. Understanding the why is the most powerful tool in changing the what. Once we uncovered that scared little girl hiding beneath the polished veneer of sunshine and order, the dynamics on the stage shifted. It was no longer about a superficial fight over credit card bills and fake picnics. It became about a deep, unhealed childhood wound that was now dictating the terms of her adult life. But insight isn't a cure. Insight is just the first page of the map. You still have to make the journey. And Jessica was not ready to make that journey. Her first instinct, once that vulnerability was exposed, was to attack. It's a classic defense mechanism. When you feel threatened, you lash out. The target was Mark. He doesn't support me, she said, her voice regaining its strength, but this time it was laced with anger. He sees this as some silly hobby. He doesn't understand the community I've built. He doesn't see the messages I get from women who say, I inspire them. I let her go. I needed to see the full expression of this defense. Let me ask you something, Jessica. I interjected once she paused for breath. What is it you think you're inspiring them to do? To find the beauty in their lives, to create a peaceful home for their families? She shot back, almost defiantly. Or are you inspiring them to feel inadequate? I ask, my voice level. Are you inspiring them to compare their messy, real, chaotic, beautiful lives to a fictional one you've staged? Are you selling them a dream while you're living in a nightmare? Because let me tell you something, that's not inspiration, that's deception. And the person you're deceiving the most is yourself. That hit a nerve, a raw one. The anger in her eyes flickered and was replaced by a flash of panic. This is the moment of escalation. This is where the blame shifting starts, where the narrative she's so carefully constructed begins to crumble under the weight of the truth. She couldn't attack me directly. My role on that stage is to be the objective voice of reason, so she pivoted back to the easiest target. This is his fault, she said, gesturing toward Mark, her hand trembling. If he were a better provider, I wouldn't have to do this. If he made more money, I wouldn't feel this pressure. We wouldn't have these debts. We could have the life that I'm trying to build. Mark just flinched, as if he'd been physically struck. I saw the audience react, a low murmur of disapproval. This was a low blow, and it was a transparent attempt to deflect. It's what we call rewriting history. In her mind, her obsessive creation of a perfect life wasn't a result of her childhood trauma. It was now a financial necessity forced upon her by her husband's perceived failures. It's a powerful distortion because it takes the responsibility off her shoulders and places it squarely on his. Hold on, I said, holding up a hand. Let's stop right there. Let's get real clear about this. According to the financials you provided my team, Mark works 60 hours a week at a good job. You live in a nice house. Your children have everything they need. The debt we're talking about, the one from the secret credit cards, didn't pay the mortgage. It didn't put food on the table. It paid for a $300 rustic farmhouse sign that says gather. It paid for a custom-made linen apron you wore in one video. It paid for a trip to an apple orchard 200 miles away because the lighting was better than the one 10 miles from your house. Do not sit here and tell me or him that you're doing this because he's not a good provider. That's a lie, and you know it. The question isn't whether he provides enough money. The question is why you need to spend it to prove something. What are you trying to prove, Jessica? She stared at me, cornered. The blame shift had failed. The audience was silent. Mark was looking down at the floor, shaking his head slowly. The tension was palpable. This is the part of the show people talk about, the confrontation. But it's not about creating drama. It's about breaking through the denial. It's about holding up a mirror that they can't turn away from. Her defenses were failing, so she tried a different tactic, minimizing. It's not that big of a deal, she said, her voice smaller now. It's just Instagram. Everyone curates their life online. Everyone shows the good parts. There's a world of difference, Jessica, I explained, between showing your best self and creating a fake self. There's a difference between sharing a happy moment and staging one at the expense of your family's well-being. You're not just showing the good parts, you are manufacturing them. And in the process, the real parts, the arguments, the debt, the fear, the exhaustion, they're not just being hidden, they're festering. They are becoming toxic. Mark told my producers that your son, who's 8 years old, asked him last week, Dad, why does mommy only smile when the camera is on? What do you say to that? That was the one that broke through. The mention of her son, the reality of how her behavior was being perceived by her own child. The fortress wall didn't just crack, it shattered. Her whole body seemed to collapse in on itself. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. Not the delicate single tear cry from before, but a gut-wrenching, painful wave of sobs that she couldn't control. This wasn't a performance. This was real. This was the grief for the life she wasn't living, the pain she was causing, and the fear she'd been running from her entire life, all coming to the surface at once. Mark, without a moment's hesitation, moved closer and put his arm around her. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't look vindicated. He just held his wife while she fell apart. And in that moment, I saw the man he was. The man who had written that letter, not out of anger, but out of a desperate love for the woman he knew was lost inside the character she was playing. He wasn't there to win a fight. He was there to rescue his wife. And now, for the first time, she was letting him. The noise of the lie had finally stopped, and in the silence, the truth could begin to be heard. That moment on stage, when the raw emotion breaks through the carefully constructed defenses, is the pivot point. It's the eye of the hurricane. For Jessica, the sobbing was a release, a capitulation. It was the white flag being raised after a long and brutal war against herself. But the work doesn't end there. In fact, that's where the real work begins. Crying gets the poison out, but it doesn't heal the wound. Now, we had to figure out how to stitch it up. When her sobs subsided, I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. I wanted her and everyone watching to feel the weight of it, to understand that this was a sacred space now, not a spectacle. Jessica, I said, my voice softer. Look at me. Where are you right now in this moment? She lifted her head, her face streaked with mascara. The mask was gone. For the first time, I was seeing the real woman, not the brand. Her eyes were red and swollen, but they were also clear. I'm so tired, she whispered. It was the truest thing she'd said all day. I'm just so tired of pretending. I know, I said, because the heaviest thing you can possibly carry is a lie, especially a lie you're telling yourself. I turned my attention slightly to include Mark. The two of you didn't come here because of Instagram. You didn't come here because of a credit card. You came here because you've lost your connection. You've stopped being partners, and you've become a director and a cast member in a play that's making you both miserable. I look back at Jessica, that little girl who needed to line up her dolls just so, to have one clean, perfect corner in a chaotic world. She's running the show. She's the one telling you that if everything looks perfect on the outside, you'll feel safe on the inside. But you know now, don't you? It doesn't work. It's a myth because you can't control life. You can't airbrush the messy parts. You can scrub the floors and bake the perfect loaf of bread, but it won't stop the fear from creeping in. The only way to deal with the fear is to turn the lights on, look it straight in the eye, and call it by its name. This is the core of it. The confrontation isn't just with the behavior, it's with the underlying belief system that drives it. Her core belief was, if I am not perfect, I am not safe. If my world is not orderly, it is dangerous. We had to challenge that. We had to offer a new belief. Your need for control, I continued, is a direct result of the chaos you endured. It's a survival skill that you learned, and you learned it well. It probably saved you in a lot of ways as a child, but that skill has now become a prison. It's keeping you from what you really want. And what you really want, I suspect, isn't a perfect picture. It's peace, real peace, not the staged, photographed version of it. I laid out a plan. This is crucial. Insight without a plan of action is just a conversation. It doesn't create change. First, she had to get honest, radically honest. That meant taking a break from her sunshine and order platform. Not forever, necessarily, but for now. The addiction wasn't to the phone, it was to the validation. It was to the illusion of control. She had to detox from that. You're going to post one last thing for a while, I instructed. You're going to post a picture of you and Mark right now, as you are. No filters, no perfect lighting, and you're going to write, I've been trying to show a perfect life, but the truth is my life is imperfect, and so am I. We are a work in progress, and we're taking some time to work on us. That's it. No long explanations, just the truth. The thought of it terrified her. I could see it in her eyes. It was like asking her to walk naked into a stadium. All that validation she'd collected, all those likes and positive comments, felt like a shield. Dropping it felt like dropping her weapon in the middle of a battlefield. Your followers who are truly inspired by you will be inspired by your courage, I assured her. And the ones who are only there for the fantasy, you don't need them. They're just customers for a product you can no longer afford to sell because the price is your family. The price is your sanity. Second, I told them they needed professional help. This wasn't something they could fix in an hour on television. They needed couples counseling to learn how to communicate again, to rebuild the trust that had been eroded by the secrets and the lies. And Jessica needed individual therapy. She had to go back and do the work of healing that little girl. She needed to learn new coping mechanisms for anxiety and fear, tools that didn't involve a credit card and a camera. Third, a practical step. They had to tackle the debt together. No more secret cards, no more hiding statements. They were to sit down with a financial advisor, lay all the cards on the table, literally, and create a budget, a real one. This wasn't just about the money. It was an exercise in partnership and transparency. It was a tangible way to start rebuilding their life on a foundation of truth, not image. I made them look at each other. Mark, I said, you need to understand that this wasn't about you. She wasn't trying to hurt you. She was trying to save herself in the only way she knew how. Can you forgive her for the methods she used? He looked at his wife, his eyes full of compassion. I already have, he said quietly. I just want her back. And Jessica, I said, you need to let him in. You need to let him see the messy parts. Let him help you clean up the real messes, not the ones you stage for a photograph. Your marriage has to be your safe place, not your Instagram feed. Can you do that? Can you let him be your partner instead of your prop? Through her tears, she nodded. I want to, she choked out. I just don't know how. You'll learn, I said. You'll learn by taking it one day, one honest conversation at a time. It starts today. It starts with the truth. The end of a show is never really the end of the story. It's the end of a chapter and the beginning of a new one that I and the audience don't get to see play out in real time. My job is to give them the tools, the roadmap, and a dose of reality powerful enough to jumpstart the engine. But they're the ones who have to get in the car and drive. With Jessica and Mark, I felt a cautious optimism. The breakthrough on stage was genuine. The pain was real, and so was the love I saw between them when the walls finally came down. But the patterns of a lifetime are powerful. The lure of the familiar, even when it's painful, is a strong current to swim against. We follow up with our guest. Of course, my team makes calls weeks and then months. Later, the first report on Jessica and Mark came about a month after their appearance. The news was mixed, which, frankly, is often the most realistic outcome. Jessica did post what I suggested. She took a photo of herself and Mark backstage. Her makeup smeared his arm around her. The caption was almost exactly what we discussed: an admission of imperfection and a commitment to taking time away to work on her family. The reaction, as I'd predicted, was split. There was an outpouring of support from people who said her honesty was more inspiring than any perfect photo had ever been. But there was also a wave of negativity. People who felt cheated, commenters who called her a fraud. The brand she had built was based on an achievable fantasy. And when she admitted it was a fantasy, those who had bought into it felt betrayed. That was her first big test. My producer said Jessica admitted she'd spent the first 48 hours obsessively reading every comment, her anxiety spiking with every negative remark. The old impulse to control the narrative, to fix the image, was screaming at her. Mark, stepping into his new role as a true partner, convinced her to delete the app from her phone, not just to log out, but to remove it completely. She said it felt like an amputation, but she did it. That was a victory, a painful one, but a victory nonetheless. They had started couples counseling. The first few sessions were rough. They were unearthing years of resentment and miscommunication. Jessica had to confront the reality that her business was built on a foundation of deceit that directly impacted her husband. Mark had to confront his own passive role in the dynamic, admitting that he had enabled her for a long time by staying silent, hoping the problem would just go away. It's hard work, that kind of therapy. It's not about finding blame. It's about each person taking 100% responsibility for their 50% of the relationship. It sounds like a math problem, but it's an emotional one, and it's tough. The financial cleanup was just as brutal. Laying out the debt was a shocking and shameful experience for Jessica. The numbers on the page didn't lie. She saw, in black and white, the true cost of her fantasy life. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal of trust. They had to make some hard choices, including selling the car she used primarily for her work and creating a strict, cash-only budget. For a woman who had used spending as a way to soothe her anxiety and create a feeling of control, this was like taking away her medication. She had to learn to sit with her discomfort, to feel the anxiety, and not immediately run from it by buying a new set of ceramic bowls for a photo shoot. Her individual therapy was a slower, deeper process. She was digging into the roots of her childhood, learning to parent the little girl inside her who was still so scared. She was learning to separate her self-worth from external validation, from the likes, the comments, the number of followers. She had spent so long cultivating an external image that her internal landscape had been neglected. She was learning to find her value in who she was, not in what she projected. My team said that in one conversation, she described it as learning a new language. For years, she had only been fluent in the language of perfection. Now, she was learning to speak the language of authenticity, and it was clumsy and difficult. The second follow-up, about 6 months later, showed more progress, but also the reality of the struggle. Jessica hadn't returned to Sunshine and Order. She'd let the domain name expire. She spoke about the immense pressure she felt, not just from the outside, but from within, to go back. It had been her identity. Giving it up left a void. She was trying to figure out who she was without it. She'd taken a part-time job at a local library. It was quiet. It was anonymous. It paid a small but steady paycheck that went directly toward their debt. She said some days she felt like a failure. She'd gone from being an influencer with a huge following to a woman shelving books. But then she'd catch herself. She'd remind herself that she was present for her kids in a way she hadn't been before. That she and Mark were talking, really talking, about their finances, their fears, their dreams. They had date nights that weren't filmed for content. They took the kids to the park and left the phone in the car. It wasn't a perfect life. It was just a life, a real one. This is what I consider a successful outcome. It's not a Hollywood ending where everything is suddenly perfect. The debt didn't magically disappear. Jessica's anxiety didn't vanish overnight. The scars from her childhood were still there. A successful outcome is one where the person stops running, where they turn around and face the truth, where they trade a beautiful lie for a messy, complicated, and ultimately far more rewarding reality. Jessica didn't find sunshine and order in a perfectly staged photograph. She started finding it in the quiet moments of an ordinary Tuesday, in a genuine laugh with her husband, in a hug from her son that wasn't directed for the camera. She had built a prison and called it a palace. The outcome wasn't that she redecorated the prison. It was that she found the courage to step outside, blink in the real sunlight, and start walking one imperfect step at a time. And in this world, that's about as real a victory as you can get.